Thank you, Morenike. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm just going to share my screen. If someone could confirm that you can see it once.
Yes, we can see your screen, Vishwam.
Okay, perfect. So I'll sort of dive right in. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to the members. And just, I think Morenike has obviously already introduced me, but I'll just sort of quickly mention a couple of things. So I've worked for about 9 years uh, in London, Dubai, and India with sort of law firms and lawyers. And I've done a fair bit of sort of policy work with international organizations and governments in central government and state governments in India. And my co-founder Ishita is also on the line. Her background is in product management and product design. So she's got about 5 or 6 years of experience handling products, dividing sort of designing products and coming up with product strategies before we did Webnyay. So essentially, Webnyay actually, so the name comprises two words, web and nyay. And nyay is basically a Hindi or Sanskrit word which means judgment and justice. So essentially, the idea is that you can access justice online, and our vision is basically to leverage technology so people can access justice and resolve disputes in a much more efficient, cost-effective manner. And our vision is to sort of build technology for dispute resolution. So we've started out with sort of arbitrations, mediations, conciliations, but we're also looking to sort of work with courts, tribunals, arbitration centers, regulatory bodies, etc. We've got three different products. Essentially, the demo that I'm going to show you today and the product that I'm going to be talking about today is the one in the middle, which is Resolve Virtually, which is essentially the technology platform for complicated disputes, between parties, between businesses, where lawyers and arbitrators are involved. We've got a separate product on the third side for arbitral institutions. Uh, Basically, that's a product where arbitral centers, mediation centers, institutions can use for their case management end to end. And we have a sort of whole lot of other features which make the process much more faster and automated. And just coming to the first product, the commercial dispute resolution, that is more for sort of low value, high volume disputes. So disputes, say, in the fintech space, in e-commerce, direct to consumer space, or disputes which are not very high in terms of the value in dispute, the amount in dispute, but obviously there are massive volumes, and a lot of these disputes, would backlog the court, for instance, matrimonial disputes and others as well. But I'm going to focus on the middle one, Resolve Virtually. Uh, so essentially, the idea, I mean, you all know this, so I'm not going to spend time here, but essentially the idea is to build or to provide technology which people, lawyers can use, arbitrators and mediators can use to make your lives sort of much easier, to make the process much more faster, cheaper, as well as sort of greener as well. So broadly, these are some of the features of the product. And I'm going to just quickly talk about the capabilities one by one and then move into the demo right away after that. The first one is electronic hearing bundle. So essentially, this is a product feature where you can create electronic bundles for your hearings. So this is, I think, is generally been around for not for too long, but it's become more popular, I think, over the last 2 3 years, where if you have cases which are complicated and quite document heavy, especially we've seen arbitration has been prevalent in, say, the energy space, infrastructure, construction, transport sectors, and these sectors are generally quite document heavy in terms of there's a lot of documents, there's a lot of evidence, and then obviously there's pleadings and everything. So to create an efficient electronic hearing bundle, we've automated a lot of the processes. And on our portal, you can basically automate a lot of the stuff which you would need junior lawyers or paralegals or trainees. So just to give you some examples, you can upload documents in bulk by yourself. You can paginate them or customize, stamp them. You can create hyperlinks across the bundles. And I'm going to show you some of the hyperlinking functionality separately. You can OCR them to make them searchable, and then you can search across your database. You can create a hyperlinked indices or table of contents for your pleadings, for your entire electronic hearing bundles, etc. We've got a virtual hearing and breakout room system. Think of this as like side for digital conferencing facility where there are different rooms, and different people have access to different rooms. So in your main arbitration room, for instance, you can hold your hearings. We've built our own video conferencing system, but we also have a Zoom integration. So if you want to use our own Webnyay's VC, then essentially, all the data stays with Webnyay. But some people are more familiar with Zoom, so they prefer that. So it automatically connects you to a Zoom meeting without you needing any sort of Zoom ID or password or premium subscription. It's all already built into the system. And the usual features that you would expect in terms of live streaming, video recording, etc., are already there. These breakout rooms and the hearing room also have an audit trail. So you can exchange messages there, you can do audio recordings there, send audio messages, you can exchange files there. And there is basically a record of everything in terms of who said what or what files were exchanged on what date, what time. So, sometimes arbitration run for 1, 2, 3, 4 years as well. So even if your arbitration is running for 2 years, you can always come back and see what documents were exchanged when, and you have a list of all the documents exchanged, all the messages exchanged, and everything. We've got cloud storage and document management. This is tailored for lawyers and for arbitrators. So essentially what we do is we create a sort of space for lawyers and arbitrators in a dispute. So you can store files there instead of saving it in your Dropbox or Google Drive. And then you can exchange files and serve files, whether it's to the arbitrators or the other side, pretty much at the click of a button. And then they're notified that certain documents have been shared with you, and then they can see it in their own workspace on the portal. And of course, you can decide which files to be shared with whom. So, for instance, if there are multiple lawyers working on an arbitration across countries, there are some files you can keep for yourself, some files you can share internally with your own team, with the clients, but also then some external files in terms of final pleadings can be shared with the other side and the arbitrators, etc. We've got a transcription, speech to text, and court reporting service. Essentially, what we're trying to build here is transcription for legal, and we're trying to bring in more accents into the picture. I think transcription has obviously become more popular and it's being utilized much more after COVID. But what we've seen was that there is a big problem in terms of it when you try to use, Microsoft Teams or Google Transcription, because they're actually meant for people speaking English in the US or in the UK, which have an accent, English or US accent. So what we're trying to do is sort of make the system, we're training our own system to begin with Indian accented English in terms of how Indians speak English, because that's one of the big markets for us. One of the other big markets for us is the Middle East region. We've had arbitrations seated in the UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Central Asia, Uzbekistan, etc. We've used the transcription service there as well. To some extent, it's been successful, but we are building an algorithms which can basically recognize accented English in the Middle East region as well as in India. And the way we've done it is that we have APIs which use artificial intelligence, machine learning, which will translate your speech to text. And at the same time, you would have an expert court reporter or transcriber who would then be checking the speech to text technology and making corrections as we go along. So essentially what this does is it massively saves up time and costs, because otherwise, to fly in court reporters from central locations is quite expensive, time consuming, and sort of quite unnecessary as well. It's almost an overkill. So we believe this solution is actually much easier, much cheaper, and much quicker as well, because you can get technology to do most of your work, and then you can only have one transcriber or say two transcribers in the hearing, rather than have people in the room and then people in the back end transcribing and making corrections. Electronic presentation of evidence. So you can basically, we have a technology where you can, present your evidence when you're making submissions, whether it's oral submissions or otherwise. And basically whatever document you refer to, it can be quickly sort of opened up on screen. So lawyers can basically focus on advocacy, and arbitrators can also focus on advocacy rather than trying to find the document in the bundle with the reference. So it's obviously, increases efficiency and massively reduces cost. We've got a dashboard. So essentially a dashboard is for, law firms or arbitrators who have multiple cases. So in terms of use cases, we've seen that, sometimes people come and use the portal only for one arbitration or two arbitrations, but we also have arbitrators in India who would use this portal for, like 20, 30 arbitrations. So then they can manage all of their arbitrations on one portal on the dashboard, and then they can track what's happening on the dashboard and what arbitration. and then go attend meetings or hearings or access the documents, etc. So basically, it helps with managing everything. And obviously, dashboard is connected to your calendar and emails and everything. So all of that automations in terms of when you want to get emails, when you want to be notified by say an SMS or WhatsApp message, what reminders you need for your meetings or deadlines, all of that is sort of customized and already inbuilt into the platform. Uh, Calendar and emails, yeah, essentially what I mentioned. This we're actually still in the process of developing. We've seen that a lot of the law firms or arbitrators pretty much only do the bulk legwork in terms of getting documents ready for hearings pretty last minute, and then they have to turn to say alternative legal service providers or other sort of companies to help out with that. So we've helped out some sort of law firms do that work in terms of what an alternative legal service provider would do. So we provide expert contract lawyers and paralegals who've worked with law firms in India as well as US and UK law firms across the world. And of course, we sort of work with Indian law firms as well on this. So in about the last sort of 15 to 18 months, we've had users from almost sort of 25 countries. As you would see, most of our focus has still been India and the Middle East region. The MENA region, we've seen sort of traction in Egypt as well. Central Asia is again a big sort of geography for us. But otherwise, we've had users pretty much everywhere in Southeast Asia, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia as well. And we've had sort of hearings, in-person hearings in London and Germany, where they've used electronic hearing bundles and EP capabilities as well. Some of the institutional cases that we've supported, so pretty much the leading institutions, ICC, DIAC, LCIA, Dubai Arbitration Center, and then ICA is an Indian Council of Arbitration. We are recognized by Virtual Arbitration as a provider and the London International Disputes Week. And we have collaborations with sort of industry chambers and arbitration bodies in India and globally as well. Just some more partnerships that we have. Hopefully ODR Africa would be another one soon. And just to sort of close off some of the testimonials in terms of international arbitrations, which we've done outside India, in terms of how we've supported them, whether it's EP services, whether it's electronic hearing bundles, or whether it's remote transcription, in the sense that our transcribers sitting in India, even though your hearings are saying seated in Dubai or Bahrain or Tashkent or wherever. So that's much cheaper and sort of more easier for everybody. So with that, I'm going to go into the product demo now. So essentially what I'm going to show you is a portal which is live for the Tashkent International Arbitration Center. They're one of Uzbekistan's biggest arbitration centers. Obviously, I'm not showing you the live platform, but we've created an instance for presentation to show people. And what I'm logging in as is either a party or say a claimant, lawyer, or counsel. So once you log in, basically this is the dashboard that I referred to. And think of this as a dashboard for say a claimant's counsel or respondent's counsel, or say the claimant or respondent's in-house lawyers. Slightly different dashboard when it comes to say arbitrators or mediators, but I think you'd get a good sense here. So on here you can basically see all of your cases which you have as claimant or as claimant's counsel, and then here you can see all of your cases, respondent's counsel is currently empty. And you can also go into closed cases. So if an arbitration or mediation is closed, but you just want to go and check the record or go and want to see the award or mediation settlement agreement, etc., or just the documents, you can always sort of go into those cases and check the cases. On the right, what you can see is what we call like a sort of wall. So similar to how in Facebook you have, or Instagram you have walls where you can see updates from your friends and colleagues and the others. This is something similar, but just on your cases. So this wall basically shows you what's happened over the last, and you can timeline your activity in terms of you want to see the last 7 days or 14 days, etc. In terms of who's uploaded what documents, have any documents been shared with you, has someone deleted documents, what hearings are coming up next, what deadlines are coming up. And you can customize this live feed in terms of what updates you want to see on the wall and what updates you don't want to see on the wall. So I'm going to go into one of the cases first. So if you click on one of the cases, basically this is a screen which comes up and it gives you basic detail in terms of what is your case ID, what is your date of, in this case, what is your date of submission, registration date in terms of the date it was registered by TAC, for instance, and your next hearing date, etc. And your award, if this is in progress, or if you have any interim awards, for instance, they'll come up here. Or once the case is closed, you can see the final award here. This part gives you sort of basic information in terms of who the parties are, and if you want to contact any of them, you can click on them, and it basically show you their email ID, phone number, etc., basic details. And then this activity is case specific activity. So on the earlier wall you can see activity across your cases, but here you will see activity just on that case in terms of documents or upcoming hearings, upcoming deadlines, etc. Now, let me take you to the hearing room first. So this is what I was referring to as the sort of digital conferencing and hearing facility. Essentially, these rooms firstly are sort of customized, and sorry for the names because it's a sort of testing environment. We have sort of different names here, but the names are sort of more like, arbitration room, breakout room, support room, etc. And you can also get live IT support from the Webnyay tech team if you're facing any issues in terms of typing messages here. Different people have access to different rooms. So the arbitration room will be where, the arbitrators are there, counsels, clients. If you have any independent experts or witnesses, they will get limited access in terms of when they need to be in the room. Other rooms can be, for instance, it can be between the client and the lawyer, or between, say, just lawyers. So if you have like 5 lawyers in different jurisdictions, you can have a room between yourselves. We've got one, if you're an arbitrator and it's a 3-member tribunal, we've got a room where all 3 of you arbitrators can deliberate and talk to each other and discuss. If there's a tribunal secretary, then the tribunal secretary can have access to the room, etc. So these are completely customizable and pretty easy to customize. And essentially in each room, you can, like I said, you can exchange messages, you can exchange audio recordings. So audio recordings we've seen is actually quite been used across India and the Middle East, because a lot of people don't want to type in English, or they just want to type in Hindi or Arabic or something, and then they would just record audio and send it, and then people can sort of hear the audio. I think something similar to what WhatsApp does for audio recordings, but you can also exchange files, etc., for instance, or a bunch of files if you want. Uh, and then whatever files basically you exchange, there's a list here which you can see shared media, and once it becomes over, I think 5 or 6, then you can open the list as a new pop-up, and then we'll basically show you all the documents which are there, and then you can download them whenever needed. And like I mentioned, there is a complete audit trail. So, even if your hearing or arbitration goes on for years and years, there is a record of everything in terms of date and time and everything, as to who said what message or what audio recording or file was sent. Each room has a completely independent video conferencing facility. And like I mentioned, we have 2 of them. One is Webnyay's internal video conferencing. So all data in this video conferencing stays essentially with Webnyay. We don't share it with Microsoft or Teams or Google or anybody. And you can do your VC and chat at the same time, or you can do pretty much what you would expect in a VC in terms of if you want to live stream like this, like we're live streaming this, you can do that. If you want to mute everyone, so this is the admin panel where the arbitrators can mute people. You can obviously share screen, raise hand, and all of that stuff. And if you don't want to do that, you can join Zoom. So if you click on this, it'll basically automatically start a Zoom meeting. You don't need a Zoom account. You don't need a Zoom premium subscription, nothing. It'll automatically create a premium Zoom subscription for you. I think this is not working because we're already in a Zoom meeting right now, so we can't have 2 parallel Zoom meetings. But it'll automatically create a Zoom meeting for you. And then you can do everything that you would expect in a Zoom meeting, for instance. And obviously, whatever messages or files you exchange in one meeting will not, be there in the other room, for instance. So they're completely independent rooms as such. There are basic functionalities like you can search through messages, you can schedule, hearings, you can schedule meetings, and if you want, for case managers, etc., or if arbitrators want, we can also show them, like schedule of other people, for instance. So who's busy when, if you're trying to schedule meetings or hearings, etc. So sort of the usual things you would expect with calendar. Currently, I should say the calendar is only internal. We've not integrated it with Microsoft or Google Calendar. And the reason for that is data protection and confidentiality. Because once we integrate it with external calendars, then we don't have power over who what Microsoft can see in terms of their calendar. They would be able to see the name for sure, whether it's ABC versus DEF, for instance. So just to have complete data confidentiality, protection, and sensitivity, we've not integrated, and all the data stays completely in-house with Webnyay. The only external integration we have is with Zoom, which is of course not mandated to use because you can use Webnyay as internal VC. Otherwise, it's a sort of a completely secure platform. All the data stays with us. Moving on, I'm going to show you the document management system, which I refer to. So if you click on files, basically think of this as like a basic version of what OneDrive or Dropbox or Google Drive does. You can upload files in folders, but essentially when you upload a file or folder, it'll give you an option to give permissions to others. So in terms of permissions, it'll show you who all is active in that particular case. Could be litigation, arbitration, mediation, anything. It'll give you the names, it'll give you the profile types, and then you can decide if you want to give them view permission or delete permission. So if you give them delete permission, they can basically edit documents, delete documents. And if you only give them view permissions, then they'll only have view permissions. And once you do this, then when they log in and they go to their file section, they would automatically be able to see the documents. So the idea is that you don't actually have to send out documents by creating a OneDrive or WeTransfer link or by email, and then people having to find attachments in the emails. Once you share it, it is automatically there on the system, and you can decide what permissions you want to give them. You can also notify people. So if you sort of tick these boxes, you can notify. So once documents are shared with them or served on them, for instance, if it's a statement of claim or defense, and you're serving it on the arbitrators on the other side, it will notify them by whatever information we have on the file. So by email, definitely, but we can also notify by SMS and by WhatsApp. And there is a record of the notifications. So if the tribunal wants to see, when documents were provided or when documents were submitted, there is a record in terms of when the emails were sent out, what time the emails were read. So there is a complete sort of electronic record of that. So I'm going to add this file. And there are basic stuff, and like you can create folders, you can rename files, you can, if you share it with someone and you want to edit permission, you can always go to that file and edit permissions, stop the delete, for instance, move files around, the basic stuff that you would expect in a cloud storage mechanism like Google Drive, Dropbox. It does all of that job. Going back to the screen, we've also got document automation in place. So in this flow, actually, we only have the initial terms of reference and procedural order, but there are multiple documents that the system can generate for you pretty much at the click of a button. So I just clicked on generate and it's downloaded this Word file for me. What this did now is it basically generated a terms of reference and procedural order for the arbitration. Of course, there are customizations in place in terms of how you would like your terms of reference to be, and terms of reference and procedural order depends obviously on a number of factors. What you see here is currently a format we have in place for the Tashkent International Arbitration Center, but we have different formats in place for arbitrations in India. We've had different formats for arbitrations seated out in Dubai, etc. But it's got pretty much what you would expect, and it'll auto-populate stuff like claimant is request presented by counsel, so it'll include their detail, it'll tell you the seat of the arbitration, the language. So a lot of the details, including on arbitrators and everything, are automatically filled into the document. So you don't need to go and find those documents and then put them in place. And obviously, depending on the customization, it'll tell you, you can pick IPA rules to be applicable, etc. So it's a pretty sort of sophisticated document, and we've seen that a lot of people actually like and use this functionality because it saves them a lot of hours on drafting a terms of reference and procedural order. And once you've done a procedural order, you can also automatically set up reminders in your calendar. So if you have deadlines coming up from the procedural calendar, there are automations built in where that can be exported to the calendar, and then that sort of takes care of that. So this is on this. I think this is it for now. I'm going to move to the electronic hearing bundle. Ishita, I'm just wanted to check if I missed out anything.
I think you've covered it, Vishwam.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to quickly just move to the electronic hearing bundle capability I mentioned. Unfortunately, I don't have a non-confidential data set, which I can show you live because it's all sort of client bundles and obviously they're confidential. But what I've done is we've created a sort of random file with some snapshots, and hopefully I should be able to explain to you what it looks like. So what you can see on the screen is basically something like the files section you saw in terms of document management. You can create bundles like these, or you can create files as you like. And of course, like I mentioned, there are a number of features already built in terms of, OCR, so make them searchable, pagination, creating indices, whether indices in PDF or Excel, etc. So all of that is sort of already built in. But then you can sort of create hyperlinks. So, if you have a written submission, for instance, you can create these hyperlinks to the exact evidence in the bundle. And then once you right click on that, essentially it'll take you to the exact document on the exact page. So, this is, for instance, document in say bundle E, and it'll take you to page, exact page where that is. So essentially what you can create is a completely sort of hyperlink bundle with all of the features, and then it saves a lot of time when it comes to basically in your hearings and everything. It saves you a lot of time to move around the evidence, and the submissions are also actually much easier and much more comprehensive and coherent to move around, whether it's pleadings, written opening submissions, written closing submissions, or just witness statements or expert reports. So obviously this is, I think, one of the more popular features which parties generally use before hearings and to start preparing for hearings as well. So that's it actually from my side. Obviously, if you want me to go back to any of the product feature, I'm more than happy to do that. But I think that's on the product demo. Hi, Mirez.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation, Visham. I see that the platform is really complete. So I have a few questions for you. When did you launch the platform? Do you have some feedback from users? How many cases did you have so far? If you can tell us a bit more about this.
Yes.
I have other questions also.
Yes. Super. So Mirez, so we've actually launched the product in stages. So I think we've launched it, I think, almost 18 months ago, but initially we were only doing India, for instance. And initially we did not have the electronic hearing bundle, or we didn't have transcription. We had all the other features. So slowly we've sort of, from India, then we sort of went on to the Middle East, Central Asia, and then sort of North Africa. And then electronic hearing bundle, we've only launched a few months ago. And transcription is actually the most recent thing we've launched again a few months ago. So I think it is very much an ongoing process. It is working though. We've had a number of cases, international arbitrations, pretty much, from very small in dispute to all the way to running into sort of $200-300 million disputes, construction documents, which, run into 25,000 documents, arbitration. So we've had very complicated disputes as well, and we've had very simple. But I think it's been a journey over the past sort of 15 to 18 months with different products being launched in different times, and then sort of expanding as well from India to the Middle East to Central Asia to North Africa, and then Southeast Asia has been sort of in the mix as well.
Every time you launched an additional service, you promoted it, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
This is exactly the way to do it in order to keep the platform on the mind of people. So congratulations again. And Visham, you mentioned that you do consumer disputes and e-commerce disputes. Did I get you right?
Yes.
So do you do cross-border also?
Uh,
So these
so
types of, I mean, are you dealing only with local disputes, domestic disputes, or do you also get cross-border disputes?
yeah. So are you referring to the product like we've showed you, or the other product which is meant for low value but high volume disputes for
Oh, so you
e-commerce?
have a different product. I didn't get that correctly. So you
Yeah.
have a different product for low value disputes.
Yes. Yes. So
The-
we have a different.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so cross-border, including cross-border.
Yes. So that is a different product that is much more simpler for low value disputes, because obviously for low value you don't really need cloud storage space, or you don't really need
Bundles
electronic
and so
clearing
on.
bundles.
Yeah, yeah.
So there we have a much more so we have much easier and much more sort of user friendly in terms of, people can just come, start arbitration or start mediation, and then sort of, quickly do it in a few days and get over with it. So that's a different product, but I didn't show that today because I thought the other product is probably more helpful for today's audience. But if you want, I can give you a separate demo for that product sometime.
Yes, I think it will be very useful. Thank you. So we will
Definitely.
connect offline. And so do you have also numbers that you can share with us for both platforms? Like, I mean, you mentioned you've had already some arbitration cases. I wonder whether also you started using the platform for consumer disputes, low value disputes, so let's call them
Yes.
this way. Do you have some feedback? I know it's very early because it's been only 18 months and probably not for the entire service. But so far, do you have feedback as to type of disputes, users, which regions they're from? So you mentioned many regions that they are using the service, but do you have numbers that you can share either now or later, but just to have an idea?
Yes, no, definitely. So, I mean, I don't have the exact numbers, but like I mentioned, I think we've had users from 25 different countries. I think the feedback has been obviously generally positive. Wherever we believe we've had scope to improve, we are working on that. So, for instance, like I think transcription is definitely one which we started building out quite late. I think from day one, people said they need transcription. Uh, but we only sort of, I think we're very much in the early stage of doing transcription, and we were initially trying to use Teams and AWS and Google, and that didn't work because of the accented difference, and then the accuracy is really bad there. So I think definitely transcription is one. Electronic hearing bundles as well. I think, for instance, we are working on a couple of features. So I mean, one of them I can mention, I think, is search. So we do have like some basic search, but I think people are saying that if we can build a much more powerful search where people can actually search within documents and the results are, better than what you would expect in a Windows, then I think that is going to be a very, very powerful tool and very helpful tool. So that is also something we're working on. But yeah, definitely, like whatever feedback we've got, we've sort of taken that into account. I think languages is another one actually. So maybe this was not possible to show you here, but for instance, we're for the Tashkent Center, the entire platform is operable in English, Russian, and Uzbek. And we've automated the platform in terms of the request for arbitration, and everything can be, it's completely automated. There's a smart form, and you can fill the form up in Uzbek or Russian, and pretty much all the information is in all three languages. So I think language has definitely been a key area where we are working on. We've not made much progress, to be honest. But even in Dubai, we've had a constant requirement for Arabic in Dubai, Egypt. Again, that is uh, something I think we should solve for, or hopefully someone will solve for. But obviously, languages is not the easiest thing to work
No,
around.
it's not, especially in these languages. So they are not all, for instance, Latin languages or Indian languages. So you have to deal with the various types of languages, and that's not easy. I know that. A last question, Vish, I'm sorry, and I'll leave the floor for others. Who pays for the service in arbitration and on the second platform for low value disputes?
Perfect. In arbitration, it's generally the parties, they would pay for it. So it depends actually. Mostly we've had, at least outside India, we've always had parties pay for it. The claimant and respondents would share the costs.
Mhm.
In India, we've either had the parties pay for it, or what happens is arbitrators take an annual subscription, for instance. and then they manage all of their cases on the portal, whether it's 10 cases, 20 cases, 25 cases. So then we just charge them a fixed fee every year, and then we don't really track how many cases they do. And then they may be charging their parties in return for this. We don't know, but that's the two models we've seen. On the low value disputes, it's generally the businesses who pay for now.
Okay, great. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you very much, Visham.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Visham. I'm going to ask Juwon to unmute himself and ask his question. Before he does that, I'm just going to jump right in and just to ask you, in respect of the cross-border dispute platform, is it a fully automated system, or is it something that you still need third-party neutrals to deal with? And then I'll give Juwon the floor after you.
I think, Morenike, it depends on requirement, but it is fully automated if you just want it as a system exists. But there are some customizations we have to do at our end manually. So for instance, if you want a new hearing room to be created between different people, you have, say, a tribunal secretary. We've had instances where the 3 arbitrators want one room, and then they want another room with the tribunal secretary because they don't want tribunal secretary to have access to all of their discussions. So then we create a new room for them at the back end by making some changes in the system. But if you're just happy with the standard package or the standard platform, then it's pretty much like a do-it-yourself. We can create one email ID for you in terms of whoever is starting it, whether it's generally it's either the claimant or claimant's counsel, and then you can automatically send out login details to respondents, lawyers, arbitrators, experts, etc. So then it's pretty much DIY platform.
Okay, I was actually referring to the low value claims.
Okay.
That's what I was actually, the e-commerce low value claims. Particularly because when Mirez was asking you the question, you answered that it's the business's rules. So what I was trying to get at is that, so some of these businesses can just have their customers go onto the platform and have their cases resolved electronically from beginning to end. That's what I wanted you to confirm.
Yes. So there we do the customization for businesses, Morenike. There is some level of customization required for business, depending on their disputes and their requirement.
Okay, can I go ahead? Congratulations, Vishwam.
Thank
this
you.
is really mind-blowing. Fantastic work by you and your team for this one-stop software for dispute resolution. Most of my questions have been asked. The only other one that has not been asked is that I hope I'm using the right language. What's the minimum bandwidth requirement to operate this software? Because it offers so much. I just have this feeling that you might need to have something really stable to be able to run it. And most of us still have challenges with unstable service provision for internet service provision. So, and is it different if it's going to be for the low value software? That's the only other thing.
Yeah. To be honest, Juwon, I am not sure. Maybe I will have to come back to you. We've obviously had, I think the biggest issue we've had in India, at least, has been around the video conferencing. I think you do need some bandwidth if you want to use our video conferencing. But for any of the other features, we've not really had any issue. Ishita, I don't know if you want to add anything to that based on your experience, but I think the short...
It came up because we have come across a software that it's beautiful, it's very clear, but when it comes to streaming, we run into trouble now and again. So it's worth knowing, particularly since you have offered everything, including transcription.
Yeah. No, Juwon, I'll have to come back to you. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have Erima. Can you go ahead now?
Okay, thank you very much, the presenter, for the wonderful presentation and the delivery. Although I didn't follow through on some aspects because my network was also giving problems. So when Mr. Juan was talking about network, he was speaking my mind. Now, my question is as to how it could function, whether we can use it for every kind of dispute. For instance, if you have an environmental dispute, can this facility be used for it? And what of a situation where you have an inter-country, international dispute resolution? How will it function?
Yes, absolutely. You can use it for any kind of dispute. Doesn't matter what sector it is, environment, intellectual property, commercial, construction. You can pretty much use it for all sectors. So the technology doesn't really depend on the type of dispute. Obviously, it is being made more for arbitrations and for mediations or conciliations. But for instance, we've used the same model for hosting moot court competitions based out of Cairo, based out of Dubai for DIFC courts, based out of Dublin. So we've used it for different types of litigation, but predominantly it was built with sort of arbitration and mediation in mind. But we're obviously trying to figure out how we can make it, or what we need to change if it has to be used by courts, for instance, whether that's courts in India or the Middle East or others. Yeah, I think that's where we are.
Okay. Can I also ask a follow-up question?
Sure, go on.
Yeah. For how long can you preserve documents? Because I hear you talk about transmission, transcription, and then translation, and also holding of documents. For how long can you hold your documents in a system, and how efficient, how does the translation function? Assuming there is it is an international translators, where you could have language barrier, not in terms of some words are difficult to translate. You may not find a fitting word in the when you want to translate it. So how do you resolve such challenges, knowing fully well that for the parties, the mediation or arbitration is party driven, and the chances of having a different translation from what one of the parties have in mind could be very high when it comes to translation in another language. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Arima. So as of now, two questions. I'll answer the translation one first. As of now, we don't have experts for translation. What we've done in the past for, say, Russian or Uzbek is relied on Google's translation service or other expert translation services on the internet, but we don't have any in-house capability for translation. For transcription, of course, that is a problem we're trying to build solutions for, and we've been working on it. But that is only for English. I think what we're trying to do there is more of accent, whether you speak with an Indian accent or, say, Sri Lankan accent or Indonesian accent. But even that is going to be limited just for English language. So we're not looking to, at least for now, transcribe, say, a proceeding in French or Arabic or any other language. So that's on translation. On the first point, in terms of how long do we retain documents, so we don't have any rule in the system yet. It is based on client requirement. And obviously, we take that into consideration when we price for the case, or we have an annual subscription price. So sometimes people say, we want it for 1 year after the case. We've seen 1 year, I think, being the most frequently requested timeline. Sometimes people say, once it's over, then delete everything but keep the award, the final award. So delete all the case documents, evidence, everything, but just keep the final award. So it's a little bit of I would say, horses for courses situation. But we can make the change specifically for your requirement in the technology. And then it can be deleted or it can be retained on the system for the duration you like.
So I have a further question for you, Vishwam. So we have another question. How does the system intend to secure data management? And while you're answering that, I think it would be nice to explain how the Zoom function is integrated, because you say there's no Zoom subscription. So does that mean you have an arrangement with Zoom, or what, how does that work? Can you explain that? Because a lot of people are very familiar and comfortable using Zoom.
Yes. Yes. So in terms of data, we obviously spend a lot of time on security, I think generally. And I've been a lawyer for 9 years and I've worked with international law firms. So I understand how important data is for lawyers, and confidentiality and security of data is obviously extremely critical for lawyers and the clients that we serve. So security is definitely we spend a lot of time with. Another reason I mentioned, we don't have too many integrations other than Zoom is actually security and data management, because we don't want to, send out data to Microsoft, Google. And I'm not by no means suggesting that Microsoft and Google are not secure. I think they have some of the most advanced security systems, but we don't have integrations precisely because we don't want to send data out or get data in. And that sort of keeps the system and server slightly more secure. Because the lesser third-party integrations you have, the more secure system will be, because you can create a wall around your system. So definitely data is I think security and is something we take very seriously, and we spend a lot of time, effort, and resources on it. And I can assure you, we follow this, the standards that international companies do when it comes to documents and everything. Sorry, what was the other question, Marenike? On Zoom.
On Zoom, yeah.
On Zoom, yes. So we do have an arrangement with Zoom. We have integrated with Zoom into our portal. So we do have a sort of license, etc., like a special license with Zoom to be able to integrate them into our system. Which is why if you have access to the platform, you don't really need separate Zoom account or premium subscription. It'll automatically just create a meeting link for you in whatever hearing room you are. And then you will have access to all of the Zoom functionalities that a premium subscriber generally has. But yeah, so Zoom, like I mentioned, is the only third-party integration we have. And that was based on requests, actually. A lot of the client feedback was that, your VC is great, but can you give us Zoom, or can you give us Teams? And then I think Zoom was preferable, I think, generally, and especially during the pandemic. I think Zoom was obviously the most preferred VC. So which is why we decided to integrate with Zoom.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions? If not, our 1 hour is almost up, and I'm going to ask Andre to say thank you to Vishwam. If we don't have, Andre is one of our advisory board members. He's on the call. So if you want to unmute yourself, Andre, and just say thank you to Vishwam if we don't have any further questions.
Nick,
I have a question.
I think I'm going to sub-delegate that task to somebody like perhaps Juan. And I've got two reasons for that. The one is I had to leave the call for 5 minutes just due to a sudden emergency. Secondly, at the moment, there's 24 people logged onto this call. At a conservative estimate, 20 of them know far more than I do about technology, software, data transfer, and all of these sort of things. My knowledge is non-existent. So while I'm very honored by the request, listening to Juan's question, I suddenly realized that Juan understands about 400% more of these things. So could I pass on this one and ask you to give that particular honor to somebody better qualified?
We're all very well qualified since we're all on this call, Andre. So all you need to say to Vishwam is thank you for a very good presentation. That's all I ask. If you don't want to.
Vishwan, can I say this firstly, that it's always appreciated when you make time available to assist us. And secondly, even though I've just explained it, I speak from a position of deep, deep ignorance on technological things. I do realize that technology is changing the dispute resolution landscape very rapidly, and therefore it's always good to hear from people that are coming up with new ideas, new products and the like. And in fact, I'm hoping that Juan and Moreneke are going to contact me separately and explain to me a lot more in detail what it is that was covered. But thank you very, very much on behalf of all of us. It also seems that we have an impressive turnout from various parts of Africa, and that I think Moreneke is always encouraging for any of these seminars where we have 20 plus people from various of the countries of Africa. It's always good. So thank you very, very much for your time. And thank you very, very much for the enlightenment that you did spread. I'm sure you did. I see that Juan, who understands these things, is nodding in agreement. So all of us convey thanks to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And thank you so much for the opportunity as well.
Thank you everybody for
Can
coming.
we request for the soft copy?
You will get the recordings. Everyone gets the recording.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to especially thank all the advisory board members that are on board, Mires particularly. We always learn from you when you're here, even though we learn from Andre too, but he never wants to admit that there's so much to learn from him. Thank you, everyone.
Lots of humility. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.